Ukraine has received humanoid robots, Phantom Mark I, for testing. The company foundation said they were delivered to Ukraine in February of this year. The American company plans to deploy the Phantoms to the front line in order to refine the technology. Foundation co-founder Mike LeBlanc says that what he has seen in Ukraine has only strengthened his belief in the value of such soldiers. He added that the goal is for the robot to be able to use any weapon that a human can use. The company also already has research contracts with the United States Army. They plan to begin trials for the U.S. Marine Corps, during which the robots will be trained to place explosives on doors to help troops enter facilities more safely.
We have a very special episode today. I am teleoperating a humanoid robot for the very first time at Foundation Future Industries. We've got a lot of really interesting stuff coming up in this episode. Stay tuned.
In the increasingly crowded field of humanoid robotics, one of the things that makes Foundation and its Phantom robot stand out is the company's embrace of the defense industry, including, perhaps someday, even weaponizing this technology. With a lot of questions to ask, we visited Foundation in San Francisco to get a hands-on demo, a chance to teleoperate the robot ourselves, and an interview with the company's founder, who envisions this robot going everywhere from the battlefield to Mars, one step at a time.
I got it.
It's common for humanoid robots to have cameras on their head, and Phantoms go all the way around. Some robots, like the Unitree G1, also include a LiDAR vision system, which bounces lasers off the environment to measure depth and distance. But Pathak told me his belief is that sometimes Mo sensors can mean Mo problems. For example, if the LiDAR data conflicts with the camera data, how's the robot supposed to determine what's what?
There are two things we want to reduce: number of sensors and number of wires.
Future iterations of Phantom will have the wires tucked away, along with other upgrades.
You'll notice the Phantom has some gloves on. Underneath these gloves is something like this. This, however, is not the final hand design. They're working on something with even more capabilities, which we got to see over there.
When it comes to creating the perfect humanoid robot hands, it turns out human evolution did a pretty good job.
I can tell you personally, I've done gripper development before. And what you run into is that, oh, well, we want to do this use case and that use case and this other use case. And suddenly you realize it just converges on a human hand.
This tendon-inspired hand design allows for finer control, a greater variety of movements, and is less bulky, meaning the robot will be able to grab more things people do in the ways people do. Speaking of hands, Phantom is learning to throw hands in anticipation of a planned USA vs. China boxing match. China has already hosted numerous robot kickboxing competitions and sporting events, which we've covered on What the Future. Now it seems the competition is going global.
Twice the overall torque throughput than any other robot on the market for its size. So with hips and everything, it would be deadly.
Be deadly?
Yeah.
After taking some punches, it was time for me to put on a VR headset and actually start controlling the robot myself using teleoperation. While I have controlled robots via remote control before, this was my first time using a VR headset. After calibrating the system, I could see tracking dots on my hands and fingers. A double tap of the fingers on one side engages teleoperation, and a double tap on the other side disengages it. You'll notice the robot moving slower than me due to some safety controls slowing it down. A couple times the tracking of my hands got a little bit messed up, where my left hand was controlling the robot's right hand and vice versa, and we had to stop and recalibrate. I've heard other companies talk about how teleoperation can be used to gather data on the right way to perform a specific task. For example, if you teleoperate the robot doing the dishes, it will have data on how to do the dishes that it can then use to inform efforts to ultimately do that task autonomously. However, teleoperation can also be an important means of control in and of itself.
You know I had to do it.
Yeah, you had to.
There are some use cases where you always want a human in the loop. So defense is a really good example of this. As you move from robots doing back office work, which is inspection, maintenance, repair, and defense, to actually weaponized active battlefield work, you always want to make sure there's a human in the loop. We have that for drones. We want that for humanoids. So really good low latency teleoperation is very helpful in a scenario like this. It's also very helpful when some remote operator needs to intervene, like the model ended up not doing what it was expected to do, and a human has to intervene and take over. Very similar to the Waymo cars.
Right now, Foundation is working with the Department of Defense on a variety of contracts mainly focused on logistics work, but Pathak says the potential he sees goes far beyond that.
We believe the future of warfare is Robots go in, they walk, how they walk, they decide. They look, they identify, how they do it, they decide. After they identify, a human does a higher order of thinking, if that's the right target, the right identification, the right course of action. A lot of the conversations have been around first body in, which does not require as much weaponization, but then also clearing buildings and for instance, there are a lot of landmines now in areas of Ukraine. You don't probably want humans going and discovering it. Also does not require weaponization. But then there are use cases which is first line of defense, would require arming them with guns. So pretty much all of those things are on the table.
While the battlefield in Mars may be Pathak's ultimate goals for Phantom, there are still a lot of steps in between.
So this is its first time walking with this like new training policy?
Yeah.
Wow, sick.
It could very well fall because their first debut of this policy. I got it. So the team's constantly upgrading and improving the policy, and we're rolling out pretty much as more improvements come in. But it's become increasingly more robust, and now we want to make it walk more naturally that humans do as well.
We've covered the increasing agility of humanoid robots on What the Future for several years, notably Atlas from Boston Dynamics and the G1 from Unitree. Both of these companies are several years older than Foundation, which was founded in 2024.
Good catch. I think almost all labor jobs would be done by robots. It's more so a function of at what time scale. We think majority of them need to be done by robots in next 20 to 30 years in context of factories, warehouses.
This is a common prediction amongst humanoid robot developers, that at some point in the future there will not be enough workers to keep production humming. At the same time, there are also concerns about automation making jobs more scarce. A jobs report from last month shows that there are more people out of work now than there are available jobs for the first time since 2021.
I'm quite optimistic that most likely what's going to happen is this is going to make the markets bigger for goods and services that today have a smaller market and make it more accessible to people, which will just increase the amount of labor force you really need to be able to do the jobs. The second scenario is that doesn't happen. That is probably the most concerning outcome, which I think starts taking shape in some kind of universal basic income. That's better than the alternative of 51% unemployment, but I think still slightly dangerous, because if the government controls your food, your health, your home, your transport, everything, I think it's too much power centralized in one body. Almost every single mutiny has been low employment, bad health services, kind of like plague, things like that. I do think there is a reset mechanism already built in, and historically humans have hit that reset button whenever it's needed. But I really hope it doesn't come down to that.
What do you think of Phantom? Let us know down in the comments.
Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel, where we explore the craziest stories, wild ideas, and things you won't believe are real. Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Let's jump right in. For over 4 years, Vladimir Putin and his Kremlin allies have relied on one key advantage in Ukraine: manpower. This is a war of attrition. Human versus human, and Russia believes it can always throw more bodies into the fight. But now, that assumption may be collapsing, because Ukraine is changing the rules of war. Humans are no longer fighting alone. They're being joined by something new, something artificial, something that looks human, but isn't. AI-powered humanoid robots. In February 2026, a U.S. tech company delivered something unprecedented to Ukraine's front lines. Not drones, not missiles, but 2 humanoid machines known as the Phantom Mk1. At first glance, they look like something out of science fiction. Nearly 6 feet tall, jet black steel body, a faceless visor. They walk like humans, move like humans, but they don't feel. They don't hesitate, and they don't stop. Right now, these robots are being tested for reconnaissance and supply missions. But their potential goes far beyond that. They can carry heavy loads, navigate dangerous terrain, and eventually, they could fight. Imagine being a Russian soldier. You've spent days crossing a deadly kill, zone-dodging drones, hiding in trenches, surviving by instinct alone. Then you see it, a figure in the distance, You fire. It keeps walking, closer, unaffected, unstoppable. It doesn't take cover. It doesn't slow down because it doesn't care. Moments later, you realize something terrifying. This isn't a soldier. It's a machine that can't be negotiated with, can't be intimidated, can't be exhausted. A glimpse into a future where war is no longer fought by humans, alone. And that future may already be here. The Phantom Mk1 is just one piece of a much larger shift. Ukraine is rapidly building a robotic military force, thousands of drones, unmanned ground vehicles, and now humanoid systems, all designed to compensate for one critical weakness: a lack of manpower. Russia has a much larger population. Ukraine does not. After years of war, millions have fled. Industries are strained, and the pool of available soldiers continues to shrink. So Ukraine is turning to machines. Robots don't get tired. They don't need training in the traditional sense, and they don't suffer from fear, trauma, or hesitation. They can go where humans can't and do what humans shouldn't. But this raises a deeper question. Just because Ukraine can use these machines, does it mean it should? On one hand, robots could save lives, reducing the need to send young soldiers into deadly combat zones. On the other hand, they could make war easier to start and harder to stop. Because when humans are removed from the battlefield, the cost of conflict changes. War becomes less personal, more mechanical, more distant, and perhaps more dangerous. There are also serious risks. What happens if these machines fail or make the wrong decision? What if one is captured and reverse engineered? Or worse, what if autonomous weapons begin choosing their own targets? These aren't science fiction questions anymore. They are real, and they are happening now. Still, for Ukraine, the choice may not be philosophical. It may be survival. Facing a larger enemy with more resources, Ukraine is doing what it must to level the playing field. And if that means deploying machines that can fight in place of humans, then that's a future it's willing to test, whether the world is ready or not. Because one thing is certain, the age of robotic warfare has begun. And once it starts, there may be no turning back. The war after human SIF. The first phase of this story was about the arrival of humanoid machines. Then this next phase is about what comes after. Because the Phantom Mk1 is not just a weapon, it is a signal that warfare is crossing a line that humanity may never be able to reverse. To understand where this is heading, we need to zoom out, beyond a single battlefield, beyond Ukraine, into the future of war itself. For centuries, war has followed a simple rule. Victory belongs to the side that can endure the longest. More soldiers, more weapons, more resilience. But what happens when endurance is no longer human? What happens when armies do not sleep, do not eat, do not feel fear, and do not break? That is the shift now beginning. Right now, the Phantom Mk1 exists in very small numbers. Just a handful of machines being tested under real conditions. But history shows us a clear pattern. Every revolutionary weapon starts small. The first tanks were unreliable. The first aircraft were fragile. Early drones were limited and experimental. But once their value was proven, they evolved rapidly. Then they multiplied. Now imagine a future where there are not just a few humanoid machines, but hundreds. Then thousands. Entire units operating around the clock without fatigue. Machines that coordinate instantly. Machines that learn from every mission and improve in real time. A human army learns slowly, through experience over months or years. A robotic army learns through data, and data spreads instantly. This is where the balance begins to shift, because the Phantom Mk1 is not just a single machine. It is part of a system, a connected network that could eventually oversee entire battlefields. Imagine a system that processes information from drones in the sky, sensors on the ground, and satellites above, all feeding into one intelligence, one system that sees more than any human could ever see, understands more than any commander could process, and reacts faster than any human. Decision maker. This concept is often described as decision dominance. In modern warfare, speed is everything. The faster a threat is detected, the faster it can be neutralized. Humans hesitate, machines do not. Humans become overwhelmed. Machines scale. Now imagine a battlefield where one side has that advantage and the other does not. It would not be a balanced fight. It would be a breakdown. This is one reason why nations around the world are watching Ukraine so closely, not just as a war, but as a live testing environment. Every robotic mission, every drone strike, every deployment of systems like the Phantom Mk1 generates data, and that data is shaping the future of warfare. Whoever understands and masters this technology first may define how wars are fought for decades to come. But humanoid machines introduce something different from drones, something more human-like. They have presence, form, movement that resembles us. A drone is distant. It is a sound in the sky, a threat you may never see. A humanoid machine walks towards you. It occupies space the way a human does. It creates a different kind of reaction, not just fear, but unease, because it blurs a boundary that has always existed, the boundary between human and machine. In combat, that boundary matters. Facing something that does not react to pain, does not hesitate, and does not retreat changes the psychological experience of war. Soldiers are trained to read human behavior, to anticipate reactions, but a machine offers none of that. It simply continues. Over time, that changes how people fight, how they think, and how they cope. War is already mentally exhausting. Introducing machines that feel unnatural only intensifies that strain. Now consider another scenario. What happens when both sides deploy these systems? Right now, Ukraine may be among the first to test humanoid machines in this way, but that advantage may not last. If these systems prove effective, others will develop their own versions, more advanced, more capable, more widely produced, and eventually, more affordable. Cost plays a major role in how technology spreads. At first, it is limited to a few, then production scales, then access expands. Once that happens, the technology does not remain in the hands of a few nations. It spreads to smaller states, to private groups, potentially even to actors outside traditional military structures. And that is when control becomes difficult. Imagine a world where advanced robotic systems can be deployed without risking human lives. No training pipeline, no fear of casualties, just machines sent into conflict zones. This changes the entire calculation of war. Historically, one of the biggest barriers to conflict has been human cost. Leaders hesitate when they know their people will die. When loss becomes personal, decisions carry weight. But if that cost is reduced, the threshold for conflict may also drop. War could become easier to initiate and easier to sustain. That possibility raises serious concerns. But there is another layer to this: control. Right now, humans still play a central role in decision-making. Even advanced systems operate under human oversight. But that may not always be the case. Autonomy does not arrive suddenly. It develops gradually. First, machines assist humans. Then they provide recommendations. Then they act with limited supervision. Eventually, they may act independently. That progression introduces a fundamental question. Should machines be allowed to make life and death decisions? It may sound like a distant concern, but it is becoming increasingly relevant. Because the technology required to enable that level of autonomy is already emerging. What remains is how it will be used. Back in Ukraine, these questions are not theoretical, they are immediate. The country faces a larger opponent with greater manpower and resources. Every advantage matters, every innovation can make a difference. If robotic systems can reduce the burden on human soldiers, they will be used, not out of ambition, but necessity. As these systems are tested and refined, other nations observe closely. They learn from each success. They adapt to each failure. Because even if the Phantom Mk1 does not determine the outcome of this war, it may influence every conflict that follows. And that leads to the next phase of warfare, not just individual machines, but coordinated systems. Networks of autonomous units working together. air systems, ground systems, maritime systems, all connected, all synchronized, all operating within a shared framework of intelligence. This is the direction warfare is moving toward, an integrated system where machines communicate, adapt, and act together. When that system reaches maturity, the nature of the battlefield changes completely. And the most striking part is that this transition may not be obvious when it happens. There will be no single moment that defines it. Instead, it will unfold gradually, through software updates, through incremental improvements, through systems becoming more capable over time, until one day, the battlefield looks different, and humans are no longer at the center of it. They are part of the system, or possibly no longer required at all. That is the trajectory now unfolding, and it is happening faster than most people realize. Got it clean format, no asterisks, no hashtags. Here is part 3 rewritten clearly and smoothly, the global arms race. If the previous phase explored where this technology is going, this part is about who gets there first, because once a new form of warfare proves effective, it never stays contained. It spreads, it accelerates, and it creates something much bigger than a single conflict, an arms race. Right now, the world is watching Ukraine. Governments, militaries, defense companies, and AI researchers are all observing what is happening in real time. Every deployment of a robotic system, every success, every failure, all of it is being studied because one question is driving everything. What happens if this actually works? If humanoid systems like the Phantom Mk1 prove effective, even in limited roles, every major power will move to build their own version. Not eventually, immediately. The United States has been preparing for this shift for years. Autonomous drones were only the beginning. From air to land to sea, the focus has been on reducing reliance on human operators while increasing speed and efficiency. But humanoid machines introduce something different. They are not just tools, they are replacements. Machines that can use the same equipment as human soldiers, the same vehicles, the same environments. That means militaries do not need to redesign everything. They can integrate machines directly into existing systems. Now imagine that at scale. Supply chains operated by machines, front lines supported by robotic units, operations running continuously without fatigue. Efficiency increases dramatically, and in war, efficiency can decide outcomes. But the United States is not the only country moving in this direction. Another major power is advancing just as aggressively. China has invested heavily in artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation. But its real advantage is not just technology, it is scale. The ability to produce large numbers of systems quickly. In warfare, that matters. A smaller number of highly advanced machines may be powerful, but a larger number of capable machines can overwhelm. Quantity can still win. Now imagine this scenario. One country builds highly advanced robotic soldiers. Another produces them in massive numbers. Which one has the advantage? That question may define future conflicts. As more nations enter this space, the race expands. Europe develops its own systems. Russia adapts and responds. Other countries begin experimenting with their own versions. What starts as a single innovation becomes a global competition. And this competition is not just about hardware. It is about software, data, intelligence. Future wars may not begin with troops crossing borders. They may begin with systems being disrupted, power grids shut down, communications disabled, networks infiltrated. Cyber warfare already exists, but when combined with autonomous systems, its impact becomes far greater. Imagine a coordinated attack. Infrastructure is disabled first, confusion spreads, then autonomous units are deployed into an environment that is already weakened. No large build-up, no warning, just rapid execution. Speed becomes everything, not just on the battlefield, but in decision-making. And that creates a new problem. Humans may not be fast enough. When decisions must be made in seconds, traditional chains of command become too slow. Information moves faster than people can process it, and in that gap, machines begin to take over more responsibility. At first, they assist. Then they recommend actions. Then they act with supervision. Eventually, they may act on their own. This is how autonomy grows, gradually, step by step. Now imagine two opposing forces using systems like this. Not just soldiers fighting, but systems reacting to each other. Algorithms making decisions. Machines adapting in real time. War becomes something different. Not slower and deliberate, but faster and more unpredictable. This introduces a serious risk. Escalation. In traditional conflict, escalation is usually controlled. Leaders decide when to increase intensity. But in a system driven by automated responses, escalation can happen rapidly. A system detects a threat. It responds. The opposing system reacts to that response. Then another reaction follows, and another. This cycle can accelerate quickly, faster than humans can intervene. A misunderstanding, a false signal, a miscalculation, any of these could trigger a chain reaction. Once it starts, stopping it becomes difficult because decisions are happening too fast. Actions are already in motion. This is one of the biggest concerns with autonomous warfare, not just what machines can do, but how quickly they can do it. Despite these risks, development continues because no country wants to fall behind. This is the nature of an arms race. Even if the risks are understood, the pressure to compete remains. If one nation advances, others must follow. If one side gains an advantage, others must catch up. So the cycle continues. Faster development, more investment, greater competition. Back in Ukraine, these global dynamics are playing out in real time. Every robotic mission contributes to a larger understanding. Every test helps refine future systems. The Phantom Mk1 is not just a tool for one war. It is a preview of what may come next. And as other nations observe, they begin to adapt, to prepare, to build their own capabilities. Because the future of warfare is already taking shape. Imagine a battlefield where no human soldiers are present, only machines, operating with precision, coordinated, relentless. No fear, no hesitation, no need for rest. At first, this might seem like a reduction in human suffering, fewer soldiers exposed to danger, fewer lives lost directly in combat, but the reality is more complex, because even if humans are removed from the battlefield, they are not removed from the consequences. Cities still exist, infrastructure still matters, civilians are still affected. If war becomes easier to conduct, it may also become more frequent, and that could increase overall instability. War does not disappear, it evolves, and in some ways, it may become harder to control. Humans bring judgment, emotion, restraint. Machines do not. They follow instructions. They execute objectives. That can make them efficient, but it can also make them unforgiving. Now consider the question of responsibility. If a machine makes a mistake, who is accountable? The operator? The developer? The commander? These questions do not yet have clear answers, but they will need to be addressed because the technology is advancing quickly, faster than the systems designed to regulate it. That gap creates uncertainty, and uncertainty in warfare can be dangerous. For Ukraine, the focus remains survival, using every available tool to defend itself, adapting to a changing battlefield. But beyond that, something much larger is happening, a transformation in how wars are fought, not defined by human strength, but by systems, data, and technology. The Phantom Mk1 is only the beginning. More advanced systems will follow, more capable, more autonomous, more integrated. And as that happens, the line between human and machine continues to blur. Once that line is crossed, it may not return, because progress moves forward, not backward. And in war, every advantage is pursued, which means the future is clear. Machines will not just support warfare, they will become central to it. And when that happens, the most important question will not be whether humans use these systems. It will be whether humans still control them. What you've just seen is not a glimpse of a distant future. It is the beginning of something already unfolding. On battlefields today, machines are no longer just tools. They are becoming participants. And soon, they may become decision makers. The line between human and machine is fading, not all at once, but gradually, with every upgrade, every deployment, every experiment. What starts as support becomes reliance. What begins as assistance becomes control. And history has shown us that once a new form of power is introduced, it does not disappear. It evolves, it spreads, and it reshapes the world around it. For Ukraine, this technology is a necessity, a way to survive against a larger force. For other nations, it is an opportunity, a chance to gain an advantage. But for humanity as a whole, it raises a deeper question. Not about who wins the next war, but about what war becomes. A future where machines fight in our place may sound like progress. Fewer soldiers lost, fewer lives directly on the line. But war does not vanish when humans step back. It changes form, and sometimes it becomes easier to start and harder to stop. The Phantom Mk1 is only the beginning, a first step into a new era, an era where conflict is faster, more automated, and more unpredictable than ever before. And once that path is fully taken, there may be no turning back, because the future of warfare is no longer a question of possibility. It is a question of control, and whether, in the end, humanity will still be the one holding it.